Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need
everyone.
to
Welcome
make
back to
your
Pencils and
novel
Lipstick.
come
I'm
to
Kat
life.
Caldwell. It is November 8th as I record this, and we are on episode 286. So today I do not have an interview for you. We're just going to talk about a few things that I have noticed this fall as I am editing some manuscripts. And we're just going to talk some writing tips. And I think before we go on, I've been thinking a bit about the podcast and how we can go forward. I am having a ton of fun just writing and spending a lot of time writing. I do still have my clients. Of course, they take up some of my time, but and I love interviewing people. But as the holidays come, a couple of people have canceled. And so I have to sort of find some new people. If you have suggestions, please let me know. But I think we're going to do a little bit shorter, just sort of writing tip things. And we might have a few more of those and a couple fewer interviews. Let me know what you think about that. And, definitely share, like, subscribe, all the things to the podcast. It is just me and the podcast. So it is always helpful for you to share. So something that I've noticed the last 9 months of doing some editing and doing some beta reading is repetitive scenes. And I've talked to a couple of people about this because I wanted to know if this was like a trend in a certain genre that I was just missing. Maybe I'm just too old. I don't know. But really, I've come to the conclusion after talking to a couple of people is this seems to be kind of a mistake that people are making. And here's the thing. When you have a scene that you really love, you can only have it from one person's perspective, usually, right? So the meet cute, you have it from one person's perspective. What I have been seeing is the meet cute full scene, start new chapter, the exact same meet cute, but from the other person's perspective. Now, there are times that people want to read that traditionally, and I can't really even say traditionally because indie publishing's been around for, really, really around. Like we've been going, really it's always been around, but you know what I mean. So like Kindle and people making money, and it's been easier for 15 years maybe. And so when we're running our own Kindle, selling our ebooks, people want that double scene as like deleted scenes or incentive, to get on the mailing list sort of thing, like build the fan base. Very few people want to read a book in which the scene that just ended is repeated, but in a different perspective. And I've literally read 3 manuscripts plus a beta read this year with that in it. So I think people have misunderstood storytelling again. And hear me out. Like I overwrite. So there are times that I'm writing a scene and I'll rewrite the scene, and you have to then make a choice, like which scene is stronger. I talk about this, and C.S. Lakin talks about this a lot, and probably other people talk about it as well. But you're supposed to choose the strongest scene, because in the end, what keeps people reading the book is the forward trajectory of the story. Now, one of the stories that I read in which it was probably 4 scenes that were repeated again and again. And honestly, I stopped reading it. It got very, very boring. I noticed that with this book and another book, they were romance books. And I think what the authors were trying to do was to keep that tension going, like that feeling that people like, the meet cute, the tension, the are they going to kiss? Are they not going to kiss? The romantic part of it. But what actually happened is you read it and you repeat, and you read it and then you repeat again, and you read it and repeat, and the tension's not holding anymore. A, you already know what's happening. B, you know that they're both in tension. You know, like they're flirting with each other. You won't understand that already, that you're not learning anything more. The story's not moving forward. We're not getting any more insight into the person. Now, the only way that this would be different is if you have a really unreliable narrator in which things are just totally different from their point of view, which would be amazing, actually, if you could figure that out. I'm not sure I could, but it would almost be like more like a horror or like a thriller where this person is completely unreliable and they're seeing the scene in a completely different way. Yeah, I don't think that you could do it as a straight romance. It just doesn't work to keep that tension. You end up getting bored. So really what you're doing in a scene is you're setting up, the story going forward. You have scenes in which you have, the introduction of the character, the introduction of the world. You have to introduce, why they're the people that the story is based on. You have the meet cute, or the sort of decision, that what starts the story going forward. You have climax, you have midpoint, you have yeah, the inciting incident is the word I couldn't remember 2 seconds ago. You have the conclusion, the climax. You have all these different scenes that you have, but it has to be a scene that moves things forward. Okay, so please avoid repeating the scene. And if you are going to repeat the scene, it really should be for a good reason. I always tell my clients, yes, we're writing the story that has spoken to us, that we really like, we really want to write. And a lot of times, when you're writing that story, you're so in that world, it almost feels real to you, right? But don't forget about the reader. Like, that is who you are actually writing it for. Don't forget about them, and be respectful of their time and their desire of what they want and expect. When they open up a book, they do expect a full story, and they expect the story to go forward at some point. And if you don't respect that, they're going to feel it. And so there are people out there who can devour books very quickly. But I think the average reader is somebody who is quite busy, who has work to do. And if the story is not capturing their attention continuously, it is going to get left behind on the nightstand, and they're going to pick up something else. That is kind of the average reader, right? Many people no longer push through a book just because. They'll DNF the book. And in this day and age of reviews being everywhere and people feeling really free to be quite open in their opinions, I don't think that we can afford to forget who the reader is and what they are expecting. So understand where your scenes are taking the story and what the protagonist is doing. If you guys want me to do another scene breakdown, like what scenes are, that would be a little bit longer episode, or I could do 2 parts. Let me know, and we can go through what each book kind of needs, what kind of scenes each book needs, and sort of do a scene therapy. I used to teach those as actual workshops. I'm not sure people are up for workshops these days. I don't know. If you are, let me know. The other thing that I have seen lately is preaching to the reader, which is not really lately. This is something that happens all the time. And it especially happens when we're new writers. And believe me, all of these things are things that I have done, and my editors have had to teach me not to do. And I've had to learn, read some books and realize what I'm doing. So, I guess explaining or lecturing the reader, preaching is sometimes what we call it. This usually comes from the writer suddenly becoming the narrator of the story. And it's really subtle, but it is it is a gut instinct feeling on the behalf of the reader. It will just be like, that's odd. And it feels like preaching because it is the writer suddenly imposing themselves into the story. So when you're setting up your characters, they are most likely not going to be exactly like you. Um, Maybe one of them will, but honestly, they should all have their own personalities, which is another. We can review personalities as well and how you come up with their personalities, but you'll see like, so I read this thriller, which wasn't very thrilling, but it was written by a former CIA agent, and so I thought it would be. And so I could tell when the CIA agent almost put herself into the story. There was one time, it happened twice. There was one time where she's talking to this other agent, I guess, and they're talking about the assets, right? The people who they sort of recruit to work for them to kind of help them spy. And they're talking about this woman who had volunteered because she's sort of been betrayed by the cartel person, and so she wanted revenge and she wanted to help America. And that's all fine. But all of a sudden, they input in there for no reason, because she's like has to go and like become the girlfriend of someone else and whatever. And then all of a sudden, there's like a paragraph and a half about how, by the way, Lila, I can't remember the protagonist's name, the man is speaking to the female agent. You do know that the CIA does not, require women to go and sleep with, require assets to go and sleep with the enemy. She volunteered to do it. That is not part of our job. We never do that. They can volunteer to do it, but, it's not something that we ever request. And then I go, okay. And then the conversation went on. And here's how I know that this is preaching and this is the writer inserting herself. Lila, that's not her name, but whatever, the female agent who's been working for the CIA for over 15 years, if that's a rule, she'd already know that rule. So why are you repeating it to her? Okay. So this is what's weird, right? You can see this right away. And yes, granted, I edit manuscripts and I coach writers. And so maybe maybe I'm more sensitive to it. But have you ever gotten that feeling of just like, why are these two people saying this? That it has nothing to do with the story. They just want to really make sure that the reader knows this, right? So a client of mine, this happened with him, and it's just the first draft. And I tell everyone, like, it's just the first draft. It's not a big deal. But every time that you have something in there that you really need the reader to know, it better make sense how they know it, how they find out about it. Otherwise, it feels like you're being lectured or preached to. That goes a lot of times we call it preach because a lot of times they're kind of saying the morality of somebody, or this is how you should do it, right? This is how you should be, or this is how you should do something. And it's because the writer wants the reader to learn something, and the writer kind of wants the reader to become something out of the book. That's really where it comes from. It doesn't always happen consciously, but I do think that we need to be aware of it even subconsciously, consciously, because it happens subconsciously. All right. So when it's something like that, now it is a little bit harder to see this. It's easy to find our repeated scenes, right? Just pull those and use them for newsletter bait, basically. But this is a little bit harder. So what you have to do is, as you're editing the story, anytime it sort of stops, this sort of conversations are happening between people, you kind of have to ask yourself as a writer, would they already know that? Like, and why, if they already know it, why would they be talking about it? So I would say to this thriller writer, don't have her be talking to another CIA agent. Have the conversation somehow come up with an asset or somebody who's completely unfamiliar with CIA tactics. I personally don't believe them because they purposely put it in the book. So now I don't believe that the CIA doesn't do that. But, that's just my conspiracy theory brain. But this is what you have to do. They would already know this, right? These two people would already know it. So why would they be talking about it right now? And if that's happening, you have to find a different way for them to bring up the conversation, or you have to find it a different place for it in the book. Does that make sense? We do not want this lecturing of the reader coming from the writer. That's what's happening when it really wouldn't be happening in the protagonist world. We need to always have the protagonist stay in the world, and the writer doesn't need to pop the bubble and enter into their world at all. This is a little bit harder if you read a lot of classics, because the writers sort of did lecture a lot back then, but it's just not nice anymore. Okay. And I guess you could hit me with an example of when you can do it or why you want to do it yourself. If you do it, just realize that some readers really don't like it. It's a real turnoff. And the other part of this book, so she's a CIA agent talking to a former CIA agent who is a Black woman, and they're talking about how all of the people at the CIA, like all the people on the middle, rung, I guess, do all the work, and all the higher ups get all the like praise, which I'm pretty sure happens in like every company. I don't know. I work for myself. So, and then everyone at the top are white men. Okay. So to me as a reader, you're telling me this stuff. And my immediate thought was, well, then why is the CIA, why aren't you making a complaint? And why is this government entity able to do that? And why are you selling this book at the bookstore when you clearly have other issues to clean up at the CIA? So I'm not sure why. Maybe my brain just moves like that. If that's happening at the CIA, we got a real problem, right? And we kind of need to go fix that. Or are you just trying to put something in there that it just doesn't make sense? Like, what's happening? Why is that happening? And why are you putting up with it? Quite frankly, why wouldn't you call your senator and figure that out? I guess they expect us to think that, that all the CIA people are worried about losing their jobs. But I'd be more worried that they're not following the laws. Maybe I overthink stuff. But this again is the writer wanting the reader to know something, because it wasn't put in a way like what I would do in that case. Let's say if the Black woman, had to leave the CIA because she was consistently frustrated with doing all the work, not getting any of the glory or praise, but her boss was consistently moving up, or her white male coworker was moving up. If they had an example that way, without telling me straight out, I would already assume, oh, the CIA has a problem. Right. And so I'm no longer being flat out told or explained something as a reader. I am being shown this issue within the CIA that she chose not to stay and fight, but to leave and find a different job. Okay. So that is how I would have approached it if I was her book coach. I'd say, we need to change this, because nobody likes to have this explained to them, because now I'm sitting here trying to read your book, but thinking about how terrible the CIA is. Right? Like that, you don't want people thinking that. You want them to stay in your book. And our brains work in such a way that when it is presented through the story, we sort of go, oh, that really sucks. But we continue with the story. Okay. Now, if you just point blank out, explain to us the issues at the actual CIA, then my brain goes, well, what's wrong with those people? Maybe we should fix that. so I'm not staying in your story. And again, we want to remember the reader. We want to remember what the reader is there for: a story, a getaway, an escape, a way to fill their time that isn't scrolling or watching television. And we want to be respectful of that desire and keep them in the story and make them want to keep turning pages, right? Okay. So I'm going to leave it there for this week. I'm trying to keep these a little bit shorter, but as you can tell, I still talk a little bit too much. So if you guys have an idea, if you're struggling with something in writing, let me know. I would love to hear from you. You can DM me on TikTok or on Instagram. You can join my email and newsletter and reply to any of those. And you can also go to catcaldwell.com, fill out the contact form, and tell me what you're struggling with. And I'll either try to explain it or teach it or help you, or I'll get somebody on here who can do a better job than me. All right. So I will see you guys next week for another writing tip. I hope that you're doing well if you are participating in Novel Writing Month. If you don't know, I don't like Novel Writing Month, but if you follow me on TikTok, you'll see why. But if it is motivating you, I wish you well. That is all that is important, is what motivates you as a writer and that you're getting your writing done. So until next time, see you later.